You'll pay for this out of your own pocket, and I don't care that the tray was slippery, Vadim said through clenched teeth, pressing the girl against the wall near the service exit. Luba dropped her eyes, trying not to look at the manager's red, angry face, and nervously fiddled with the edge of her apron. A broken piece of an expensive porcelain plate still lay on the floor, while thick mushroom sauce slowly spread across the light tiles of the corridor. That's half your day's pay, Luba. Or you're out of here before evening. Vadim gave a contemptuous snort, stepped over the puddle of sauce, and walked toward the dining hall, leaving her alone with the mess. Timofey stood silently by the sink, holding a damp towel in his hands. He carefully pretended to sort the dirty cutlery, but he didn't miss a single word of the scene. Inside him, a dull anger was boiling. In 10 years in the restaurant business, he had seen all kinds of managers, but open rudeness always made him want to fire a person on the spot. But right now he couldn't do that. Right now, he was not the owner of one of the most successful restaurant chains in the west of the country. He was just Tara's, a new trainee on probation who had been hired 2 days ago. At first, the whole disguise idea had seemed like a ridiculous plot from a cheap movie, but the reports from the Chernivtsi branch over the last 6 months had been catastrophic. Revenue was falling, staff turnover was beyond all acceptable limits, and customer reviews were full of complaints about service. The restaurant director blamed the crisis and hard times, but Timofey, who was used to keeping his hand on the pulse of his business, sensed a lie. So he came here himself, rented a modest one-room apartment on the outskirts of Chernivtsi, bought ordinary jeans and a couple of cheap t-shirts at the market, and came to apply for a job in his own restaurant on Kobylianska Street. Meanwhile, Luba crouched down to pick up the sharp shards of the plate with her bare hands. Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Let me help," Timofey said quietly, stepping closer. He took a dustpan and broom from the supply closet. "Careful. You'll cut yourself." "Thank you, Taras." She raised her eyes to him, and there were unwanted tears shining in them, but she blinked them away quickly. "It's my own fault. Vadim is right. I should have watched where I was going. Someone spilled water there, and I was rushing with a hot order for table 3. He's not right," Timofey said, sweeping up the last bits of food. "In a place like this, the floor should be dry. That's the responsibility of the cleaner and the manager who oversees the dining room. And deducting the cost of broken dishes from a waiter's salary is illegal." Luba gave a bitter smile as she stood up. She wiped her hands with a paper towel and straightened the badge on her chest. "You're new, so you're still fair. We have our own rules here. Vadim fines people for everything. For being 5 minutes late, for a stain on an apron, for a customer refusing a dish. If I start arguing, he'll just leave me without tips for the whole week or make me scrub the refrigerators after my shift, and I need this job." Timofey looked at her carefully. Luba couldn't have been older than 25. A plain, slightly tired face, light brown hair pulled into a tight ponytail, neat nails without a trace of manicure. She wasn't trying to seem better than she was, didn't flirt with the cooks like the other girls, and worked as if her life depended on it. "Why don't you just quit?" he asked, throwing the trash into a large black bag. "There are plenty of other places in the city." "My mother is sick," she replied simply, not trying to evoke pity. "She needs medicine every month. It's a lot of money. And I pay rent for a room in the dormitory. Here at least they pay a stable rate, even if it's small. In other places they might cheat me altogether. Anyway, I have to run back to the dining room before Vadim starts yelling again." She quickly fixed her hair in the corridor mirror and, putting a friendly smile on her face, went back to the guests. Timofey remained by the sink, his hands clenched into fists. He had built this chain so that people would enjoy being there not only as customers but also as employees. He had always been proud that his staff had medical insurance and decent working conditions. And now it turned out that in his restaurant, hundreds of kilometers from headquarters, some petty manager had built his own little kingdom, extorting the staff and humiliating defenseless people. The workday dragged on unbearably. The restaurant was packed. Smells of fried meat, coffee, and expensive perfume mixed into the thick, heavy air. Timothy, as a trainee, did the dirtiest jobs. Polishing dishes until they shone, taking out the trash, unloading crates of vegetables at the back door, and helping the waiters clear tables after guests left. His back ached from unfamiliar labor. He had long since grown out of such physical work, spending his days in a comfortable leather chair behind a laptop. Around 5 in the evening, when the flow of customers had eased a little, Luba came into the cramped staff room. Timothy was sitting there on an old stool, drinking cheap instant coffee from a plastic cup. The girl sank heavily into the chair opposite him and stretched out her legs. Her black work shoes were covered in fine dust. Finally, she sighed, kneading her calves. 10 hours on my feet, for more to go. She took a plastic container of homemade food from her locker. Inside was ordinary buckwheat and a piece of boiled chicken. Want some? She offered, holding the container toward Timothy. I took a lot. No, thanks. I'm not hungry, he lied, though his stomach had long been empty. He didn't want to eat the food of a girl who spent half her salary on fines and medicine. Listen, Luba, he said. I saw how Vadim assigned the tables today. He gave the best ones to large groups, to Vika and Oksana, and you got mostly couples who only order coffee and dessert. Coincidence? Luba chewed her food and smiled crookedly. You're very observant for a newcomer. No, it's not a coincidence. Vika is his favorite. She smokes with him all the time and laughs at his jokes. Oksana just shares her tips with him at the end of the shift, and I came here to work. I don't know how to flatter people, so Vadim puts me on the least profitable tables or sends me to serve families with small children, after whom I have to spend half an hour cleaning food from under the table. And the tips are pennies. And nobody complains to management. Timothy looked at her, trying to understand the scale of the problem. The director only came once a week, locked himself in the office, signed papers, and left. He didn't care what was happening here. As long as the numbers matched, everything was fine. And if someone tried to complain to the owner? The owner, as far as they knew, lived somewhere in the capital or at a resort. To the waiters from Chernivtsi, he didn't exist. They were just numbers in a report. Those words hurt Timothy. He had always considered himself a good manager. He arranged corporate events, issued bonuses for holidays, but he had to admit, he really had drifted away from reality. He didn't know the names of the people who carried plates in his restaurants every day. He had delegated too much and lost control. Maybe the owner simply doesn't know the truth? He asked quietly. Maybe, Luba said with a shrug. But that doesn't make it easier for us. Life isn't a fairy tale, Teres. Everyone survives however they can. The staff room door flew open with a bang. Vadim stood in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned at the top and his gaze flashing like lightning. What do you think this is, a picnic? He barked. There are 6 new tables in the dining room and you're all hanging around here. Luba, get back out there. Table 8 is asking for you. They're unhappy with the steak. But I didn't take their order. That was Vika's table, the girl tried to object, getting up. Vika is busy. You go sort it out, and no conflict, or I'll make the cost of their whole bill come out of your paycheck. Vadim turned his gaze to Timothy. And you, trainee, take a bucket and go clean the toilets. Someone broke a beer bottle in there. Timothy slowly stood up. A vein pulsed at his temple. He wanted to walk up to this insolent guy, grab him by the collar of his white shirt, and throw him out into the street, but he held back. He needed more evidence. He had to understand where the money was going and why the revenue was falling. A manager's bad behavior alone couldn't explain losses like these. There was a whole scheme operating here. Understood, Timothy replied calmly, taking the mop. The next several hours turned into a complete Friday night chaos. The restaurant buzzed like a beehive. Loud music played, waiters ran between tables, the kitchen bells rang without pause, signaling dishes ready to be served. Timothy worked mechanically, but his eyes noticed everything. He saw Vadim approach the cash terminal several times when the cashier wasn't there and quickly enter some codes. He noticed the bartender pouring expensive alcohol over the measure line, clearly cheating customers or underfilling portions in order to sell the leftovers later. It was a coordinated theft system. And Luba clearly was not part of it. That was exactly why they were pushing her out of the team so openly. Late at night, when the last guests began to leave, an unpleasant situation arose. At a table by the window sat a group of drunk men. They ordered a lot and left generous tips, so Vadim had personally hovered around them all evening. But when it came time to pay, one of the men, heavy-set and red-faced, began protesting loudly. "What is this amount?" he shouted, pointing at the leather bill folder. "We didn't order 3 bottles of whiskey. We drank 2. Do you take us for idiots?" Vadim instantly changed expression. He rushed to the table, putting on an oily smile. "My apologies, gentlemen, there seems to be some mistake. We'll sort it out right away. Let me see who served you earlier this evening." The man waved vaguely toward the dining room. Vadim turned sharply and fixed his gaze on Luba, who was just clearing a neighboring table. "Luba, come here," he ordered in a tone that allowed no argument. The girl went pale but approached. "Did you enter alcohol for these gentlemen?" Vadim stared at her directly. His eyes narrowed unpleasantly. "No, I didn't even go near that table," she replied, calm but trembling. "These are your guests, Vadim. You personally brought them their drinks." "What are you talking about?" The manager raised his voice, trying to drown out the noise in the room. "I saw you bring the order over. You made a mistake and charged an extra bottle to their bill." From a few meters away, near the dirty dishes station, Timothy felt everything inside him tighten. Vadim was trying to pin his own fraud on the girl. Most likely, the 3rd bottle of whiskey had been sold off the books to other customers. Vadim had simply entered it into this drunk group's check, hoping they wouldn't notice. And when they did notice, he decided to make Luba the scapegoat. "I didn't enter anything. Check the system. There should be an employee code." Luba tried to defend herself, but her voice drowned in the accusations and the customer's dissatisfied muttering. "You're going to argue too?" Vadim hissed, grabbing her by the elbow. His fingers dug painfully into her arm. "You're not only unprofessional, you're a liar. Tomorrow you don't need to come in. You're fired. And I'll deduct that bottle from your salary, the little you have left, anyway." Luba yanked her arm free. In her eyes, despair fought with humiliation. She understood that arguing was useless. Vadim was the manager. His word meant more than the word of an ordinary waitress. She turned and, barely holding back tears, quickly walked into the staff room. Timothy set the tray on the nearest table. His patience had reached its limit. He approached Vadim, who was currently bowing and scraping before the customers, apologizing for the incompetent staff, and tapped him on the shoulder. "Step aside for a minute." His voice was quiet, but carried the kind of authority he used at board meetings. Vadim blinked in surprise, not recognizing the silent trainee Tara's in that tone. "What do you think you're doing? Get back to work. I'll deal with you later." "No, we'll deal with this now." Timothy didn't back down. His gaze was heavy and cold. Vadim, sensing a vague threat, followed him into the corridor near the kitchen. "Listen here, you," the manager began, poking a finger into Timothy's chest. "You're nobody here. And if you want to keep this job, you'll go to the terminal right now, open the transaction history." Timothy cut him off, not raising his voice. "Show me which key was used to charge the 3rd bottle of whiskey for table 7. And if it wasn't your key, I'll pay for the bottle myself. But if it was yours, you'll apologize to the girl and pay from your own pocket." Vadim fell silent for a moment. His eyes darted around. He had not expected this kind of boldness from a newcomer. You're sick. What key? I'm the manager. I'm not obliged to show anyone anything, especially you. Then I'll call the police, Timothy said calmly. And we'll review the security footage together. I saw you enter an order half an hour ago, while Luba was in the kitchen. That's fraud, Vadim. And if you don't settle this with the customers now, without involving the girl, you'll have serious problems. The manager blanched. He realized this strange trainee had seen too much. Vadim nervously looked around, swallowed hard, and trying to preserve at least some dignity, hissed. Fine, I'll handle it myself. It was just a technical error. But you don't work here anymore. Get your stuff and get lost. Timothy said nothing. He turned and walked to the staff room. He didn't care about Tara's being fired. Tomorrow he would come here in a completely different status. In the changing room, it was quiet. Luba sat on a bench by her locker, already dressed in ordinary jeans and a gray sweater. Her shoulders were slumped, and she absently turned an old mobile phone in her hands. She wasn't crying, but her face was gray with exhaustion and hopelessness. He fired me, she said dully without looking up when Timothy came in. And he won't give me the money. I don't know how I'll pay for the apartment this month. I'll have to ask the landlady for a delay, but she's strict. She might throw me out. Timothy sat beside her. He had a fierce urge to hug her, to tell her everything would be fine, that tomorrow he would fire Vadim, give her job back, raise her salary, and pay a bonus. But he understood he couldn't just reveal everything. It would look like a joke or a cheap trick. He had to do it properly. You know, he began slowly, looking at her slumped shoulders, sometimes what looks like a catastrophe is actually the beginning of something better. Vadim is not the owner of this world. He's just a petty crook. And believe me, justice exists. Luba gave a bitter smile. You're a good guy, Taras. But justice only exists in movies. In real life, people like Vadim always win because they have power and arrogance, while people like me just try to survive. She stood up, slung her worn bag over her shoulder, and headed for the exit. Wait. Timothy stood too. It's late, transport isn't running. Let me walk you home. Where do you live? In the dormitory near the university. It's far. 40 minutes on foot. No need. I'm used to it. I insist, he said firmly. They stepped out onto the night street of Kobylianska. The city was already asleep. Streetlights cast a soft yellow glow on the old cobblestones, reflecting in puddles after the recent rain. The air was cool and fresh, free from the heavy smells of the kitchen and perfume. They walked side by side in silence. Timothy felt strange. He was used to a fast pace, business meetings, to every minute costing money. But now, walking through empty Chernivtsi streets beside this simple, sincere girl, he felt a strange calm. Why did you stand up for me? Luba suddenly asked, breaking the silence. Vadim fired you because of me too. Didn't you need this job? I needed more than just a job, Timothy replied carefully. I was looking for something else, and I think I found it. She didn't understand his hint and only shrugged. You're weird, Taras. Not like a normal trainee. You have a different look, like someone who's used to giving orders, not mopping floors. Timothy gave a faint smile. Her intuition was impressive. Maybe one day I'll tell you my story. But right now, something else matters more. What are you going to do tomorrow? Tomorrow is Saturday. I'll go to Kalinivsky Market. A friend of mine sells clothes there. She asked me to cover for her on the weekend. I can earn at least some money. And on Monday I'll start looking for a new job. They approached the old brick dormitory building. The windows were dark. Only a dim lamp above the entrance flickered weakly. "Thank you for walking me," Luba said, stopping and looking him in the eyes. In the weak light of the street lamp, her features seemed softer. The tired shadows under her eyes were less visible. "Sorry you lost your position because of me. Don't worry about me." Timothy couldn't stop himself and lightly touched her shoulder. His fingers felt warmth even through the thick fabric of her sweater. "Promise me one thing. Don't look for a job on Monday. Take the day off." She raised an eyebrow in surprise.